Welcome film fans to In Defense Of, the series where I actually take a movie that, you know what, most people might say you shouldn't like, and I tell you why it's okay to like it. When I was a kid, I watched Scooby-Doo, and when I was over at my grandparents' house, I would, watch it on Cartoon Network when it was on, and I thought it was kind of a little cheesy but fun at the same time. And when I was even younger, we would actually record ABC's A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, and we had those on VHS that I would actually rewatch, as I was a kid. So I've always been familiar with Scooby-Doo and the whole lore around it, but I kind of grew out of it the older I got. So when this new movie Scoob came out, it was my opportunity to finally reconnect with the character, and I probably would have skipped out on it if it hadn't been for the quarantine and the pandemic. The movie starts with a classic California song, and we're introduced to Scoob as a puppy, and he steals some food from a Euro place. And as he's being chased around, he eventually runs into a young Shaggy. Shaggy sticks up for Scooby-Doo, helps give him his name, and basically adopts him. Now, we get the really cheesy foreshadowing about the whole collar thing and showing and being told why it's important. And you know what? That's perfectly okay, because this movie is made for kids, so sometimes things need to be spelled out a little bit more for them than for adults. Shaggy and Scooby-Doo dress up for Halloween, and after being picked on by some bullies, they meet up with Fred, Daphne, and Velma. They investigate the creepy-looking house where it turns out to be, just a guy in a mask, and they solve their first crime as a group, and that's when they decided to become the Mystery Squad. And this is where the movie is probably at its best, and one of the best parts about it, which is that this feels so awesome. This is the origin story that so many people would have loved to have seen. And that leads us right into the brand new CGI version of the Scooby-Doo intro from the 1960s cartoon, which looks awesome. And if you are a fan of that show, you're going to watch that, and it's just going to make you feel just so nostalgic. In the next scene, we see Simon Cowell actually meeting up with the group because they're a little low on money and they need to, find some funding, because after all, you need to eat in order to survive. And Simon Cowell says that they need to dump Shaggy and Scooby because they just don't fit in. The group actually capitulates. And I understand why it might seem weird to bring the gang together only to separate them, but in this case, people who have seen this movie probably have already known what Scooby-Doo is all about, so we've seen a lot of the situations where the gang is all together. So having them be separated and seeing them go off on their own adventures, even though we know they're going to come back together, is kind of refreshing and gives us an opportunity to get to know these characters a little bit better. Specifically the relationship between Shaggy and Scooby, which is what this entire movie is all about. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, that's actually a good thing. When Scooby and Shaggy go bowling later that night, they're attacked by a bunch of robots, which actually, this is probably one of my favorite sequences in the whole movie, because it feels like, from the animation to the way they designed the chase and everything else, felt so much like Scooby-Doo. Again, this is a movie that, while a little, basic and, a little bit more telling than showing, still is pretty solid. I mean, I'm having fun watching it. And then it goes nuts because Shaggy and Scooby are beamed up to the Blue Falcon ship, and that's where they meet up with Blue Falcon, Dynamite, and Dee Dee Skies. And I'm going to be honest here, Blue Falcon is actually a lot of fun. I mean, he's a very insecure, kind of more driven by social media type of guy, and I actually thought he had a lot of room to grow to becoming a better character that you wanted to root for. Anyway, we find out that Scooby and Shaggy are being chased by Dick Dastardly for some mysterious reason that we can't quite figure out. And this is why this movie starts becoming pretty good, because Velma, Daphne, and Fred, in order to apologize to Scooby and Shaggy, they find out that they were chased by these robots, which leads them down this path as well to find out what they can on their end. And Blue Falcon and Dynamite, Shaggy, Scoobs, and Dee Dee are now trying to find out what the deal is on their end. And so we're getting two different pieces of information at the same time, and I actually find it pretty enjoyable. I like that method of storytelling. I also don't mind that we have Blue Falcon and these other Hanna-Barbera characters come into play, because it's not like it feels totally out of place. I mean, we should be used to a lot of cinematic universes now at this point, but honestly, Scoob still feels like a standalone movie. It's revealed that Dick Dastardly is trying to get his companion back, Mutt, and it's actually pretty touching that he's just trying to rescue his pet dog. Because as it turns out, as he was trying to find Alexander the Great's wealth, he opened up a portal. Unfortunately, it was a one-way portal, and the only way he can get back in there is to go basically through the front door, which requires Scoob, who is a descendant of Alexander the Great's pet dog. Sure, it's a little convoluted, it's a little complicated, but you know what? I just explained it to you pretty simply, so it's not like it's that complicated. We get to see how Fred, Velma, and Daphne would operate without Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, and we find out that, guess what? They all just need each other, especially after those three are captured. Now, Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, Blue Falcon, and Dino Mutt, and Dee Dee, in their quest to stop Dick Dastardly from getting all of the items he needs in order to make this portal, they try to capture it first, which leads them to a particular island that has Captain Caveman in it. Honestly, it might have felt like it was really, pushed in there, but to be honest, it still fits with the context of the film that we're being presented with. Dick Dastardly eventually is able to capture Scooby-Doo, and that sets up the final third act of the movie. Dick Dastardly is successful in getting Muttley out of that dimension, and they try to also grab as much gold as they can. Unfortunately, by opening up this portal, they release a huge, giant, three-headed dog. I forget the name of it right now, but now we're kind of in a superhero type of third act, which, to be honest, doesn't really fit with the movie. I mean, after all, this wasn't just going to end with them coming up with a simple little trap and then, ripping a mask off of somebody. Although I will say they did pay homage to that with Dick Dastardly more than once, of just ripping something off and them going like, "Ah, Dick Dastardly." It was pretty great. And yeah, there are some moments that you can call, such as, Scooby-Doo taking off his collar, or Shaggy sacrificing himself in order to save Scooby-Doo by going to the, by choosing to stay in this alternate dimension. But we know this is a kid's movie, and we know it was all going to work out in the end. In the end, Dick Dastardly is defeated, and he's taken to jail, and we end with, to be honest, kind of a weird, DJ beach party thing. But you know what? If you like this movie, that's perfectly okay, because there's a lot in it to enjoy, especially if you're watching it for some of those nostalgia feels. And if you're watching it with a family, this is a perfectly good family movie to sit down and watch. Sometimes we like to overthink films, or we tend to be overly critical, but this is simply a movie that is just pure fun, and it is an enjoyable family film.